Tonight I'm going to speak about a difficult topic, about the current state of American Jewry, which many of us find somewhat frightening. This is a new time for us. I think our situation has dramatically changed. I'm going to talk about where we are and how we got here. And we need to take a look at how American Jewish leadership is or is not protecting us from these mounting threats. And as you'll see, and as Judy hinted, I'm quite concerned about the performance of our leadership. Finally, I have some suggestions as to what it is that we should be doing. This really should be a two-day seminar, but I'm going to do it with the rabbi's blessing in 45 minutes, with time afterwards for a Q&A. So let me share my screen, and there we go. Okay, one sec. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I just wanted to start out with some pictures to show you that Judy did not make this up. That is me on the right in Sudan. I was helping to liberate jihad slaves from Sudan in a war that had taken over 2 million, mostly Christian Black lives in the South. We eventually got President Bush to intervene, and through our anti-slavery movement, which did something that may no longer be possible to do, we united the left and the right on the issue of the enslavement of Blacks. I don't know if that could be done. I'm still trying to do it with with a Nigerian catastrophe. And then on the left, there is Martin Luther King's widow and Thomas Menino, the mayor, and I did get the prize. So Judy didn't lie. Okay. There is a deepening crisis, and we're going to think about what there is to be done. So what is the current state of American Jewry, psychologically and realistically? I think we're increasingly anxious. There are increasing security concerns. I know that when I was bar mitzvahed in the Bronx, way back, and then when I got married, and then when I went to shul to go to services, we didn't need armed police. And now I'm told that practically every Jewish institution, every Jewish synagogue is concerned about security or has security, sometimes armed security. This is a huge change for us. Why? What's happening? I could go on for hours and hours listing you or developing a list of all the terrible things that are happening, not just the violent ones, but the non-violent ones. But Jews have been murdered in Pittsburgh, San Diego, Jersey City. You could see videos. Jews can see videos of Jews being beaten up in the streets in New York City of what was something like a pogrom in Los Angeles. You could see videos of people storming a Jewish building in Hoboken with gunfire. Right here in Boston, a rabbi was stabbed. Jews are in universities. The Jewish students are under siege. Daily, we're defamed by the New York Times. Daily, if anybody wants to read the best pushback on the latest New York Times provocation, read Daniel Gordis's piece. It's fantastic. We're maligned in the United States Congress, and we're demonized in politics. This has an effect. The latest polls show that more than half of Jewish students feel that they are unsafe, and half of them hide their identity. Imagine that in America, the golden Medina, right? FBI hate statistics show that Jews are the group that is most targeted by violent attacks. My friend just did a deep dive into the FBI statistics, and he comes back with Jews are 10 times more likely to be smacked, to be hit, than Asians. 10 times. Okay. So let's go to the sky, 30,000 feet up. Let's look down on the game board, on the playing field. And what I see is a perfect storm. What I see is that the four largest world ideologies apart from classical liberalism, which is under siege from progressives, but apart from classical liberalism, four major ideologies are all at once, and that's important, all at once, targeting Jews. So the two on the left, the radical Islamists and the radical leftists, we call that the Red-Green Alliance. That Red-Green Alliance is the thing that is chasing Jews out of Europe. If you notice the skyrocketing prices of condos in Jerusalem, it's not only because Israel's doing great, it's because all the French Jews are putting their fingers on something that they may have to run to in buying properties. The white supremacists we know, and the black supremacists we need to know more about. So the tree of life. So let's take a look. The white supremacists, we've known about these people. They have been here forever. They will always be here. Right-wing, racist, anti-Semites. But the question is, why are they coming out now when for so long they wouldn't show their face too much? And now they're coming out and they're murdering us. On campuses, the left-wing, radical leftists, you could call them, Palestinianists, anti-Israelists, have made the life of Jewish students on campus in many, but not all places, in many places, really stressful, really stressful. I can tell you stories that, you could cry about. These nice Jewish kids going to school, identified now as oppressive white, adjacent whites, targeted and tainted with all of the bad things that white society has. They're the 1% of the 1%ers, the Jews now. And of course, they cruelly, unnecessarily oppress and occupy the indigenous, indigent, innocent, darker-skinned Palestinians. So the Jews are racists. Anybody who, that's the line that's coming out from this quarter. This quarter is growing. Okay. Radical Islamists. Here in Boston, we have the largest mosque in the Middle East, bigger than the one in the East Coast. Bigger than even the one in New York City. And the guy who set this up is Yusuf Qaradawi. Yusuf Qaradawi is the spiritual head of the Muslim Brotherhood, and you could see him if you Google him every day saying things like, throughout history, Allah has imposed upon the Jews. The last punishment was carried out by Hitler. This was divine punishment for them. Now, we don't know enough deeply about the Farrakhanist black nationalist front against us. And I'm going to show you something that's going to be pretty upsetting. Part of this I think you probably have seen, but some of it you haven't seen, and I'm sorry to show it to you, but we have to open our eyes.
Satanic Jews. They control everything and mostly everybody. You know what they do? Call me an anti-Semite. Stop it. I'm anti-termite.
Jews have ever been present among us is to open their outposts, their retail stores, to sell us damaged, cheap goods marked up against the price. They were down there in the cotton fields in the Mississippi Delta teaching the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who were too stupid to keep us in check after the end of the Civil War. It was the Jews that have taught the white man all the way up to the NBA right now, a modern day microcosm of a plantation. Minister Farrakhan, contrary to this idea, he attacks them. He is Allah's weapon against them as a life-giving son. He is exposing them. He is making them known because through the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that only he is bringing, that's right, we will be freed of this blood-sucking parasite, so they will no longer be able to sell us alcohol, drugs, depraved sex, and every other type of low-life thing that is keeping us from a hereafter.
The deluge of anti-Semitic attacks in Brooklyn over the last couple of weeks committed exclusively by members of the Black community.
It seems like the Jewish people own all the buildings out here, and they own everything, and they're not sharing nothing. They own everything. Then they're coming over here, they're taking over,
And
but
that's
they're
why-
not renting it back to us. See, they're kicking us out. Love conquers all. They're controlling all the jobs, the economic growth, and the community.
You think the Jews here are not really American?
They not.
So black people would have reason to attack Jews.
I wouldn't say I have reason to, but it is understandable.
Shocking video shows kids in Philadelphia, in America, at an Islamic center appearing to vow to chop off heads and sacrifice their lives, all in the name of Allah. Watch.
صدقنا وهب الحياة رخيصة فازوا بجنات من الرضوان فاح العطور المسك من أجسادهم أوها تكون القدس عاصمة لهم وتكون مرجع مرجم وجبان وسنضرب الأعناق عن أجسادهم ونحرر الأقصى الحزين العاري ونقود جيش.
We will chop off their heads.
Just a second, just go back for a second and think about what I've shown you. I think Farrakhan may be the most dangerous single individual to the Jews. No one is going to go up to him and punch him in the nose. No one is going to challenge him directly. The Jewish leadership has not found a way to effectively take him down a notch. He's only gotten stronger. You saw the picture of him posing with Obama. More recently, he has had tremendous success with Black celebrities and sports figures. And all of them spread that message in ways that are unimaginably powerful and wide-reaching through social media. And that is extraordinarily. You notice that it was Fox News, by the way, that showed the piece about the Muslim kids in Philadelphia. Now, that's because on both sides of our political divide, people only want to talk about the bad anti-Semitic content and promotion of the other side. And so it's only, unfortunately, pretty much for the most part, it's only people on the right who have exposed or tried to expose both Farrakhan and the Islamists, where people on the left are, as you know, targeting the right-wing neo-Nazis. And of course, we have the problem of influence of Jew-hating people from places on the earth which where they come from, anti-Semitic cultures, people steeped in anti-Semitism throughout the Arab world, and they're coming to the United States. And this is really a taboo subject because so many Jews want to welcome the refugees, even without, and they're afraid to even broach the topic of, well, let's vet them, let's see what they think, because what they think is probably not so good. And yet the Jewish community doesn't want to raise the question of vetting people who come from the most anti-Semitic cultures on the planet. So why we are now in a position where, let me say it this way, Israel has been defamed. The people who have taken the Palestinianist anti-Israel narrative those people have captured many of American major institutions. That is the professoriate, the media, the left-wing groups on campuses, now the high school curricula, the liberal churches, and also now the most energetic part of the Democratic Party. And so the word goes out and the message goes out. not necessarily in the right-wing neo-Nazi voice, or not even in the Farrakhan voice, but that Israel is bad, and Israel is the biggest Jewish project on earth. And so if Israel is bad and it's racist, that means, what's the logical next step? That all the Jews in America who support Israel must also be racist. And that is something that we hadn't thought of all these years fighting anti-Israelism. So I want to talk about how and why we have fallen. Anti-Semitism is a virus that morphs. There are variants, like there are variants of COVID. It has different forms. What is invariant is the pattern that anti-Semitism has. And let me just, this is Yossi Klein Halevi. He says it really, really well in 2 minutes.
What anti-Semitism does is turn the Jews, the Jew, into the symbol of whatever it is that a given civilization defines as its most loathsome qualities. And so, under Christianity before the Holocaust and Vatican II, the Jew was the Christ killer. His blood be upon our heads and upon our children. That's forever. Under communism, the Jew was the capitalist. Under Nazism, the Jew was the race bully, the ultimate race bully. Now we live in a different civilization. Now we live in the civilization where the most loathsome qualities are racism, colonialism, apartheid. And lo and behold, the greatest offender in the world today, with all the beautiful countries of the world, is the Jewish state. The Jewish state is the symbol of the genocidal, racist apartheid state. Criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. Criticism of Israel is denying Israel the right to exist, calling Israel the Zionist state. That is anti-Semitism. That is a classical continuity of thousands of years of symbolizing. That kind of language can come today from the far left. It can come from white supremacists. It can come from Islamist extremists. It can come from many sources. But all of those groups converge on one idea. The Jew remains humanity's victim.
So how is it that the Jews, who are so smart, missed this new anti-Semitism? How is it that we fell for the line that criticism of Israel is legitimate criticism of Israel's policies? And even when the New York Times filled its pages with such criticism, reported on Jewish conduct more than it reported on almost everybody else's conduct, how is it that we continued to think that this was not going to lead to the place that we now are in, where so many more people are believing that Israel is bad, and inevitably that means that we Jews who support Israel are bad? This has weakened our reputation. This has, I believe, was the key that opened up the box of the neo-Nazis and the right-wing supremacists, the racist supremacists, who for years had been hiding under a rock because it was not proper to hate Jews in the way they hated Jews. But now they can. Now they can. Okay, so Jews are smart, and they sometimes know what anti-Semitism looks like and smells like. And so I'm going to go to Alan Dershowitz's favorite anecdote. So this is President Lowell from Harvard. So President Lowell from Harvard, wanted to restrict the number of Jewish students that came to Harvard, because there were so many of them. Talented young men were were accepted, and he wanted to put a stop to that. So at a board meeting, this is a famous incident, he said, Jews cheat. And one of the board members, I think it was Leonard Hand, said, wait a minute, but everybody cheats. Protestant kids cheat, Catholic kids cheat. And Lowell's answer was, keep this in mind, but we're talking about the Jews, okay? So how did the Jews not know to say, when it came to Israel, wait a minute, every nation state in the world is the result of one group taking land away from another. There are no virgin birth nation states, maybe a Micronesian island somewhere, but France is a development that was one people took from another people. So why the Jews? Why the disproportionate focus on the Jews? And I think, and that's exactly what it is. And you can show that it's disproportionate. For example, there are 24 other barriers that separate people in conflict around the world. And they're listed here. Okay. But why is it that the only separation barrier in the world that is the apartheid wall is a Jewish wall? Why are not all of these apartheid walls? Look at the focus on Jewish cruelty, right? So between 1978 and 2014, there are about 4 million Muslims who were killed by other Muslims. And in that period, there are about 8,000 or 9,000 Muslims who were killed by Jews who didn't wake up one morning and say, gee, I hate Muslims, I'm going to kill them for no reason, but who killed them in self-defense, right? How is the world so focused on this disproportionate, unfair criticism of the Jews? Well, there's a problem. There's a problem. And that is that on the right, you see all of the countries that could be labeled as extremely evil, medium evil, low evil. Let me see if I can get rid of this thing here. Yeah, okay. On a scale of 0 to 10, if 10 is the most evil, where is Israel versus China, versus Mauritania, where there are hundreds of thousands of black slaves today, versus Nigeria, where blacks are being slaughtered and enslaved, versus Saudi Arabia, where there's female genital mutilation every day, versus all of them? How is it that Israel is being treated as the worst? And you know what? There's a Jewish trap. The Jews have trapped themselves because the Jews and the anti-Zionists both want a disproportionate focus on Jewish conduct. The Jews, because they want to make it better, right? It's Jewish law and Jewish custom and Jewish principle that self-criticism is a supreme moral value. It's a way to perfect our individual characters and to improve our societies. And so we want to know about it. And when we see anything that a Jew does, we want to make it better. And it's as though the Jews every day are clapping their chest, as in Yom Kippur. They want to be their Torah perfect self. But to the outside world, and especially to the anti-Zionists, who see those flaws as uniquely Jewishly evil, that serves them. And the Jews haven't really figured out a way to do self-criticism that does not become in the service of anti-Zionism. So I'll say it again. The anti-Zionists want to focus on, and the anti-Semites want to focus on Jewish flaws, which they portray as unique as proofs of Jewry's unique evil. And the Jews themselves are also focused on Jewish flaws, but for the opposite reason, to make us better. This has, in a way, been a trap for us. Where can I go? I do not. All right, there we go. Okay, so while Christians are being exterminated across the Middle East, the so-called human rights movement is focusing on Israel and ignoring that. And I can tell you that when I try to explain to people that the mass murder of Christians, blacks, and the enslavement of men, women, and children in Sudan was an egregious, horrible human rights crime that everybody ought to drop what they're doing and run to the barriers to protest, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And that is because that the human rights community is a fraud. The human rights community in the West is an absolute fraud because it doesn't care about the principle of equality. It doesn't care about the principle of a single standard for human conduct. It is there because it's mostly composed of decent white people who want to expiate their white sin, their white guilt. And anytime whites, and now the Jews are whites, are seen to be doing something bad, that for them is the most important thing, not to focus on the worst evils. And in fact, if you tell them about these things, about what's happening to women in the Middle East, or to, there are actually right now black slaves in 5 African countries owned by Muslims, Algeria, Libya, Mauritania, Nigeria, and Sudan. If you tell them that, that distracts them. They don't want to hear about that because they're in this business of the human rights business to expiate, to make themselves, to confess, and to become better people because of what white people have done. This is a double sin because it falsely portrays the whites as much worse than they are, and it abandons the people who most need human rights power, and that is many of the people in the Middle East, the gays who are thrown off roofs or stoned, the women who are treated like chattel, the black slaves, the Democrats, the secularists, the atheists in the Middle East. It abandons those people in order to selfishly focus on the sins of white people so that they can make themselves feel morally pure and better. This is a horrible, horrible sin, and the human rights community can be open to being attacked on this if people knew how to do politics properly. Okay, so I want to go back and tell you a story. The year is 1989. The new anti-Semitism is surging. Every day I'm sitting in Boston, I'm reading the Boston Globe, and I'm seething because day after day, the Jews are bad, the Israelis are bad. There was one that I think the most famous and funny one was, an Arab man was arrested after he tried to bomb something, but the bomb blew up in his face and he was blinded. And the Boston Globe headline was, Israel convicts blind Arab, right? So anyway, I'm sitting there and I met Andrea Levin, who heads camera, and we talked about forming camera in Boston. And we were about to form it, and the ADL guy in Boston, Lenny Zakem, you might know the Zakem Bridge, was named after him. He's a great guy. He comes to us and he says, don't do camera. Let the ADL be the ADL for Israel. And we said, why? He said, because if you do camera, you'll just be, you don't speak with the voice of the Jewish people. You'll be just one of many organizations in the big tent. And yes, you can say all of the wonderful things you say, but if ADL says that the media is lying against the Jews again, they speak with the voice of the Jewish people, that would be powerful. And you know what? We said, yes, let him do it. And he didn't do it. And I want to tell you that if anybody writes a book about the history of these times, that day that he decided not to do that began the day of the decline of Jewish influence and power in America. Okay. Jew hatred is different, and it's deadly. It's different than hatred of blacks. It's different than hatred of Asians. Most minorities are defamed by demeaning characteristics: lazy, indigent, stupid, etc. But the Jews are hated for the opposite reason. We're industrious. We're wizards, but we're scheming wizards. We don't stop. We're so clever. But what we're trying to do is to control and exploit the world. And what that means is that hatred of blacks doesn't reach the point that hatred of Jews or hatred of Asians doesn't reach the point that hatred of Jews is, because the only thing you could do about these Jews is to eliminate them. You don't have to eliminate the blacks if you hate them. You can, be against giving them welfare, whatever the racist stuff is, but they don't threaten Western civilization. They don't threaten Christendom or Islam. It's the Jews, because anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory. And the solution is elimination, either of their religion, like happened, forced conversions, the race that's under the Nazis, and now the state. Okay, so now we have to, that's where we are, and that's a little bit about why we are where we are, and I'm going to rush through this. Jewish leaders are failing to protect our community. I just want to say that if you look back to World War II, both in Europe and the United States, the same failure of leadership happened. They didn't understand the threat. They failed to protect Jewish lives. They suppressed dissent in the United States. You know the history of the Berkson Group and Jabotinsky's movement. They were delusional. They were cowardly. They failed to influence American policy. You know about the story about the St. Louis. And they assumed the civilized world would prevent genocide. And in America, they had this tremendous fear of dual loyalty. And they were morally cowards. Okay. Why is Jewish leadership failing? I mean, it's failing because anti-Semitism is rising dramatically all over the place. And if your job is to stop it, you have not stopped it. They don't understand the emerging threats. They don't want to understand it. They don't want to point to the politically incorrect sources of anti-Semitism. Why does the ADL focus extensively, almost exclusively on the neo-Nazis? Because there's nobody in the big tent who's going to be mad at them for that. Everybody in the world is going to be against neo-Nazis. But you know what? There's no Nazi professors on college campuses. There's no Nazis in the government, in the Democratic Party in the government, that may stop the funding of help to Israel. They fail to understand the nature of political power. They have conflicting loyalties because many of them are leaning to the left and haven't understood the new anti-Semitism, and they're conflict averse. Our leaders are nice people. They don't like conflict. Americans are fat and happy. We're playing golf, we're playing mahjong. Most of the bad stuff hasn't hit us. We now are wincing and getting nervous because we see these terrible videos. Okay. So here's how they're failing us. They focus as I said, on the far right. They don't want to internalize. This is very painful for all of us, because all of us who grew up liberals, all of us, everybody on this Zoom is a classic liberal. We believe in equal opportunity. We don't believe in equality, demand for equality of results, but we do believe in equal opportunity. It's painful to internalize the left's betrayal of the Jews. They don't know what to do with it. And they're clinging to an older vision of a liberalism and a leftism that would protect the Jews, as it sometimes did in the past. They don't want to think about the mass immigration of non-white immigrants steeped in Jew hatred. It's a very dangerous thing for the Jews to take up, but it's a fact of life. And finally, they're failing to understand the misalignment between progressive politics and Jewish communal welfare. In general, our leaders are utopian, and their progressive and universalist worldviews make protecting Jews seem parochial. You know, we want to be for everybody. We want to be for everybody. They think that their mission should be to fight all forms of hatred with the same vigor and the same resources. They assume that we have enough money and we have enough security to do that. They are politically partisan. And they're not held accountable. You know, these people who would criticize you, if any Jew criticized them, are the first to criticize the elected leaders, the elected Jewish leaders in Israel. They themselves here are not elected. They're anointed by wealthy donors who don't hold them accountable. Okay, so they're making these mistakes. They think that fighting racism and promoting social justice will reduce hatred. But you know what? That was their strategy, and it blew up in their face, because it's the very groups that we helped, the feminists, the gays, the blacks, the Latinos, the transgenders. They're the ones who are most targeting Israel and supportive of Israel. They thought that there would be reciprocity. They thought that there would be, they would stand with us as we stood with them. That didn't happen. It blew up, okay? They think that training people about sensitivity in the Holocaust are effective. They're not effective. It's just, there's no study that shows that that's effective. They think that we have enough resources to protect everybody in the whole world. And they think that we can benefit from the influx of immigrants from Jew-hating cultures, and we are not going to benefit from that. So if you take a look at any one of the web pages of the federations, the ADL, I mean, the AJC is turning in the right direction, I have to say, but the JCRCs, and here's what you're going to find. This is what they're doing with our money. Their main focus is still on this older strategy that they don't know what to do about, that has failed. Okay, so now what is to be done? And I'll end and we can have a discussion. We are in a state of emergency. Our leaders need to mobilize the community to educate us about all of the sources of anti-Semitism. I know David Harris just broke with the rest of them, and he's the head of the AJC. He said, we have to be swivel-headed. We have to see dangers from every side. We have to stop just looking at the right. We have to develop and promote leaders who are willing to fight back for us. We have to prioritize our resources because we're in a serious emergency situation. And we have to build alliances. We can build alliances with people who have mutual interests, with Asians, with evangelical Christians, with conservatives, with Black conservatives. People are doing this, by the way. We have to talk to people about the actual true nature of Jew hatred, that it's a conspiracy theory. It's not like the other hatred. And I think that's what we have to do. Now, I have decided, after all of my work for the last 30 years in fighting the external enemies, the professoriate and the high school curricula and the liberal churches and the Islamists, the radical Islamists, and the Black anti-Semitism, I've decided we cannot win. I've been blessed because I know all of the people who raced to the front lines to stick their fingers in the dike because the leadership of the Jewish community didn't do what it needed to do. So we started, and all of the wonderful people that I know and I love, you know, from Camera to Stand With Us to ZOA. I mean, for Hasbara fellows, I could, I'm going to miss 10 of them, but they're all SPME. All of those people are fighting the external enemy. I don't think they should do it. God bless us. We should still all do it. We can't win unless we challenge Jewish leadership to change. I think we can do it. I've started a project to do it. If you want to work with us and challenge your own local Jewish leadership, challenge doesn't mean bash them in the head necessarily. Challenge means to talk them through this, to talk them into a new strategy, to ask them about what strategy they're now going to have. If you want to work with us, send me an email. Subject is roundtable. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm back and we can do questions.